All right, we are on, and I'm so excited because today is May 31st. So, this is the last interview I'm doing for my whole mouth breathing awareness campaign for the month of May. So, I want to do a good recap before I introduce Kate, who I've got here. But basically, the whole idea this month was to try to bring awareness to myofunctional issues and sleep disordered breathing issues through highlighting mouth breathing, which is such a huge symptom that so many people have, and they don't realize the bigger impacts and the bigger connections to our overall health. So I've been interviewing Myo Mentor graduates every day this month. So like I said, this is the 31st interview, and I've been wanting them to share their stories because I get to hear all these amazing stories about people's health journeys or their kids' health journeys. But I think if patients could hear this, or if other providers could hear these things, then I think we can start to spread the awareness and the field will grow. So I'm super excited to have Kate Kitzes here today. She's going to share her story, and I think it's going to be kind of your story, your kids. You're going to take us from beginning to end, right?
I am, yes. Yeah,
All
I'm pretty
right.
excited to be here. So thank you, Sarah.
Oh yeah, you're welcome. Why don't you introduce yourself? You can say where you're from and all that. I know you're a hygienist, myofunctional therapist, and actually you do a lot more. You're doing stuff with green health. You're doing stuff with breath work, yoga. Yeah, I'd love for you to share more because I think that kind of stuff is so needed. So
Yeah. Well, really, I guess you could sum it up as a general wellness health coach, someone just there to support you, validate you that,
awesome.
these chronic issues have a rhyme and a reason. Yeah, it's my personal opinion that it's kind of almost like the parenthesis problem. If you can figure out what's going on here, the rest of your health kind of falls into place.
So true.
Yeah. So that's really where I come from, whole body health, but focusing from the mouth.
Yay,
Um,
I love it.
yeah. I guess kind of my approach has developed over time. It really started for me at birth, like so many of us. We're born with a restricted tongue. It's not always screened for when it's further back on the tongue. What they would call that posterior tethered
Yeah.
neural tissues. So tongue ties there. So we don't realize we have them. Our parents don't realize, and we learn to compensate. We get around it because we got to eat, we got to breathe. And for me, that really, it gave me all kinds of symptoms my whole entire life. Um,
Really? And so did you learn this and then like you're able to reflect back? Is that kind of how you have connected these dots, I guess?
yes, yeah. It wasn't really until I got much older, was in the hygiene career for probably a good 5 years before I started to really hear or come across these things of the myofunctional therapy and airway health, and even just some of the stuff of like epigenetics, and that
Mm.
we're not doomed to be stuck with what we're born with. Yeah, so I guess to go back, my first initial run-in with all of this stuff was when I was about like 9 or so, and it was at a friend's birthday party, and really I had to go home early after this party because my stomach was not having the fun time it was supposed to.
Oh
And I went
no.
home literally curled up on a ball in like agonizing pain. Like I was 9 and I had never felt anything like that in my life. I was just debilitated. And
Wow.
in my mind, I was cognizant enough. I was like, well, why are none of the other kids like this? What is wrong with me? I'm broken and I'm defective. Return me. Like there's something not right. And honestly, that's really where my love for all things health kind of started. I mean, I was like reading the Grey's Anatomy book on the bookshelves or anything I could get my hands on. And it just continued to grow
Did you
in
ever
high.
figure out what it was or why you felt so bad?
Not really. No, they didn't have any answers. I mean, I've been tested for all kinds of things. I do have a few food allergies, but
Okay.
nothing crazy. I mean, your
But
classic
that
berries. Yeah, I
That
don't know.
initial thing just started your thought process around health and,
Hmm.
maybe trying to problem solve around what could be going on with me. And okay,
Yeah,
that's interesting.
yeah.
Then where'd you go from there?
Well, I dove into the eating and the nutrition and the things that might be going on in the gut health. And yeah, I think the first step that it really was just like healthy eating, like avoid the processed foods, the sugars, and that's what everyone's told, right? And
Yeah.
it helps, but it's not just what you eat; it's how you eat it. And for me, I also always thought I was a really good sleeper. I could go to sleep at a drop of a hat, and I could sleep all
Ah,
day if you would let me. And so it's like, oh no, I sleep great, I sleep fine. That's not my problem. Um, and it wasn't until I was actually researching some stuff for my husband who was sleeping poorly. I read Dr. Stephen Park's Sleep Interrupted,
oh,
and he was talking
wow.
upper airway resistance syndrome and LPR, that silent acid reflux,
Hmm.
and all of these interrupted sleep patterns that aren't snoring, that aren't, that
Yeah.
really significant sleep apnea. And I was like, oh, this is me. This isn't, my dad or my husband or whoever it may be. I mean, this is me.
Yeah,
And
it flies under the radar so much because most
yeah,
people are younger, they're healthier, they're thinner, they might have really good diets, they might exercise, You don't have to be an old overweight man. I think I talked about this in the interview with Dr. Courtney Levine earlier this month. And you think, oh, that's not me because you don't look like the old overweight man, and that's I'm hoping that that's changing that view on who can have sleep disordered breathing, and especially with UARS. I'm hoping that these videos can even just get that message out.
yeah. I mean, that's powerful. If you can sleep right, I mean, it allows everything else to happen. Your body's able to heal. It wants to heal,
Yeah.
and you just have to give it what it needs to do that. And sleep was a big part of it for my story and really my whole family. Um, yeah, I
So
mean,
you read the book, you
mhm,
started looking at your husband, and
yep.
then when did you transition into myofunctional therapy? Or what was the next step?
Yeah. So when I was looking at that, really, I was also looking at a lot of the epigenetics at the same time. Um,
Mm.
my father-in-law had actually had a heart attack, and so I was looking for things on that because the hospital at the time said, well, it's genetic. It's nothing you
Ah,
could have done because my in-law family is like some of the healthiest people I know. Like they exercise so much. They've always eaten healthy. Like they're very health conscious according to everything in the traditional sense.
mhm.
Um, but
Yeah, so
I
it
was
doesn't make any
pregnant.
sense.
Yeah, it didn't make sense. And I was pregnant at the time. So to me, being my hormones charged and everything, it's like, okay, so you're telling me my father-in-law is gonna die and my husband's gonna die and my unborn baby is gonna die. Like, you know, you hit this panic mode. You're like, I
Yeah.
must find answers. Um, so I went into the bunny hole that we all speak of, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
we all go down it. And I found you did some work and interviews with a natural health podcast. I don't know if you remember Girl Gone Crazy,
Mm.
but I saw that stuff there and it's like, huh, that's
Wait, which
interesting.
one was it?
Girl Gone Green
Oh
was,
yeah, yeah, Girl Gone
yeah,
Green. Yep. That was
yeah,
I'm glad you saw that.
yeah. It was kind of fun. But then I was like, it just got wheels turning and churning a little bit. And I also listened to a few podcasts on A Tale of Two Hygienists. I know you had Michelle Strange on. Uh,
Yes. And she
and
did
she,
an interview because she's a Mile Mentor graduate too.
yeah. So I mean, it's a close knit world once you get into it, but
Yeah.
yeah, it was just all these things that kind of happened at once, and I was just light bulbs and all the puzzle pieces coming together, and um, yeah, it was kind of just one of those moments where I'm like, now I see it in everyone, and
Yeah.
it's pretty crazy.
So was
But
it in my class that you started to realize that maybe you had a tongue tie or mouth breathing, or what did you pick up on that made you think about the
yeah,
myofunctional stuff beyond the sleep stuff?
yeah. Well, I did know that I mouth breathed that night, and for the life of me, I couldn't figure out why I was doing that. Maybe it was allergies. Maybe it was, the acid reflux at night, but the acid reflux happens because your airway collapses. So why was my airway collapsing in the first place? Like, what's going on? I didn't have the traditional crowded, crooked teeth, super peaked roof of the mouth, or any of those symptoms. My tongue mobility, honestly, I could touch my nose and my chin. Like, I'm like, my tongue moves. It's fine. It's not restricted.
I'm not tied. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But everything with like Dr. Zagi's functional approach and that assessment, I was like, oh, I am compensating. I am using these muscles down here, and it is taking from my diaphragm. It is going down through my right hip, my knee, and my ankle. Like, that is my pain pattern. I don't know if people are familiar with the airway posture, but kind of the high shoulder, hip twisted. Yeah, it's a hunch too, but it's also that torquing and the twisting of the body. And I had those issues my entire life too. I always had hip that would pop and come in and out of joint socket.
Did you have you looked into having your tongue tie released? Did you do it?
Yeah, I had it released.
Oh my goodness.
Actually, just at the beginning of this year, right before all the COVID stuff hit. It was kind of crazy.
So how did that go? Like, what happened? Did you feel changes like in your hip and your diaphragm and all that?
I did. Well, that was the thing, is when it released, when he released I went to Charles Edmond. He's an ear, nose, throat.
In Puyallup, yeah.
Because I've got nasal problems as well. But so anyways, when it released, I could feel my diaphragm like release. Like, that feeling when you're on a roller coaster and your stomach drops. And it was just like,
oh my goodness.
Whoa. And I got actually honestly pretty nauseous, and I was not expecting that. And I was like, okay, this is a whole new world. But even as I was driving home, I was like sitting in the car and my head was resting on the back of the headrest. And I was like, it normally doesn't do that. What is this? I'm sitting back and this is comfortable.
Yeah, that's amazing.
It was. And the next day after I woke up, I didn't have a headache. And for people that have this chronic fatigue and chronic pain symptoms, like these chronic headaches, they just become such an innate part of your daily life. You've had them your whole life. You don't really question them. They bother you, they bog you down. You can't live the way you want to, but you kind of just accept it as being normal.
So you were having headaches, like kind of subtle, low level headaches all the time, or what were your headaches like?
I would have headaches pretty much every day, temporal and here from clenching. And then I would get other ones that are kind of more in the frontal lobe and behind the eyes. And I would actually get pretty regular migraines. That I would have to go lay down, close my eyes, because I couldn't even see. I would have those visual auras.
Wow.
And it's just one of those things that every doctor I went to was like, take some medicine, like Excedrin,
or
drink some water. Like, it just was never really addressed. I'm like, there's something going on here. I don't know what yet, but
so your immediate experience was you felt the diaphragm drop, like that roller coaster feeling. You could put your head all the way back.
Yep.
Did your headaches get better? Did your clenching, like what also changed for you?
Yeah, the headaches, being that I have the myofunctional training, my swallow, like instantaneously, the back of my tongue could actually work the way it was supposed to.
Wow, okay.
Yeah. I would find, and I still find this now, if I do wake up at the night or in the morning, because I have kids, I do listen for them pretty frequently. My little one's like she's how old now? 20 months?
Okay. So you got mom alerts going on.
Yeah. But if I wake up, my tongue is gently suctioned to the roof of my mouth. Perfect. And my jaw is closed. And that's something that never would have happened before.
Yay, good.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So you've been working on the tongue posture, nasal breathing at night, tongue tie, symptoms have gotten better.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, that all sounds really good. Now, you also mentioned before we started recording that you think there's some overlap with your kids. You did mention your husband a little bit too.
Yep.
When did you start to look into your kids, and what have they gone through, and what's your husband gone through as well? Because I know you said your whole family has a story.
Yes. Yeah. Well, really, we've all been doing this journey together, which is another thing that I really like to focus in my business is I want to see families working together to become healthy together, because it does run in families.
I
And
love that.
when you support one another, it just makes it so much easier.
I
Um,
know. I always
yeah.
feel so bad when the parents are like, oh, well, we have to take care of this kid first, and then this kid, and then the husband, and then the mom, is
Yeah.
last. And I'm like, if there was a way that people could do it all together, I always think that would be better, but
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and thankfully with myofunctional therapy, I mean, you can kind of do some
you
generic
can.
exercises.
Oh, yeah, I think you can. Mhm.
Yeah, you can do it as a family. I do understand the cost of having like airway orthodontics
Oh, geez. Yeah,
and surgeries that, if insurance doesn't cover it, depending on what's in your area. Like, I totally get that.
for
Um,
sure.
yeah. And my husband and I went through and did it first with the tongue ties. He has to get kind of some other nasal stuff still corrected for himself.
Okay.
But he's a little bit more complex because his
Ah,
teeth when he was really young were radically crowded. And I mean, he was classic airway problem with asthma and allergies.
so
And
he's
so,
probably been mouth breathing for sure throughout his life.
yeah, always. I mean, I've always, even before I knew about this mouth breathing stuff, he would sit there and posture with his mouth open, just relaxing. And I'm like, close your mouth. Even before I knew that, I'm just like, no one likes mouth breathing. There's stigma with that. You don't really know why, but yeah. So, but he had teeth removed with his orthodontics.
Okay.
And so he's got to go through a much more expansive airway orthodontic stuff. Being in the area that I'm in, we're very fortunate. We have lots of great doctors,
There's
like
so
Dr.
many great
Santiago
doctors.
and Dr. Bacow, and I'm sure there's more, but there's just lots of options. So
Yes.
we'll be well cared for there. I do think we are going to get my 4-year-old in an Alpha appliance
Cool.
first. So
With Dr. Santiago, or who will you see?
yeah, we're
Yeah.
planning to use Dr. Santiago, and then
Yeah.
we've got a local doctor here in Maple Valley, that Dr. Koss, who's an osteopath, and
Oh, cool.
he's really traditional, and I love his approach. I'm sure a lot of people have heard of like Dr. Weil and his breathing techniques, but
I
it's
haven't actually. Maybe explain it a little
oh,
bit in case anyone's listening.
yeah. So he's very, very holistic. He's got a lot of mindful meditations and mindful breathing exercises and books and a lot out there. And he and Dr. Cross, they actually trained with the same initial therapist way back in the day. And
Awesome.
it really goes into the whole body complex and trying to make sure you're healthy and strong and vital, and your body can do what it needs to without medications.
Yeah. Well, I
Without
mean,
the
breathing is really the root of everything. I mean, if you're breathing dysfunctionally just because you're mouth breathing, it doesn't end there. It ends
yeah.
with are you using your chest or your diaphragm, and
Mm-hmm.
how are you breathing? And gosh, I mean,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and right now it's breathing is a very poignant thing with all the COVID and getting your
totally
oxygen into the deeper lungs and down into those lower lobes. I mean, that's where the most
so
oxygen
important.
is uptaken, and everyone right now, like, breath work could potentially make the difference on whether you can make it through or not. If
For
you're
sure.
physically fit and physically able to do it, it can highly increase your immune system and your body's ability to heal. So
Have you heard the stuff people talking about with CO2, like humming to increase CO2,
yeah.
and also nitric oxide, because the nitric
Mm-hmm.
oxide can really help with antimicrobial, antibacterial, all that, antiviral.
Yep.
So I listened to a webinar with Rosalba Courtney, and she was talking about humming as like supercharging your nose to like filter out bad things. So
Yeah, it's fascinating, all these
so
things that
cool.
are coming out. And I love nitric oxide, like that, like the whole concept of it from a molecular level is so fascinating. Total
I
nerd
know.
level coming
I
out
know,
here.
we're so nerdy.
I know.
I love nitric oxide too.
I know. um, but it comes from, your pituitary gland is where it's released, and then it's held in the sinuses. But it also, I don't know how much you've heard about the link with, the melatonin side of things too, because that's also a pituitary gland.
No, I didn't. I mean, I know vitamin D is like critical for
Mhm.
so many things. Even there's a huge overlap with vitamin D and sleep and gut health and gosh, all the stuff that Stasha Gomeniak talks about with sleep and vitamin D. It's a really big deal. But tell me about this pituitary gland thing.
Oh yeah, well, it's during the day you should have more of the nitric oxide production, and then the nitric oxide production should go down and the melatonin production should come up. But if you're not cleansing, I guess, the nitric oxide through your nasal breathing throughout the day, the hypothesis and theory right now is then the melatonin, that cycle is getting disrupted.
Okay.
And so then people are having a harder time falling asleep too, which is
Well, if nitric oxide affects melatonin and sleep cycles, I have to know about that. That's interesting. So send me
yeah.
any articles you have on that because that's very cool.
Yeah, it's definitely every day there's like new articles popping up. It's so fun.
No, this
I
is
don't know
great.
if you saw the breastfeeding one that's been going around on the Mile World right now. The like MRI.
The research that Richard Baxter just put out. Yeah, that's really good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exciting.
Yeah.
It's exciting to
Which
see new stuff like that.
It is. And tying that in, I guess, with my kids' stories, being a working mom, you have to bottle feed when you leave. Like, and there's just a major disconnect that no one really ever talks to you about selecting a bottle or how to do it in a way that, they're not dependent on it and eventually can get to a cup. And when do you do that? And and pacifier
That's really cool.
use and all of that too. It's all
Have you
connected.
done like training classes on this, or did you just kind of do your own work, or what other training have you done?
Yeah. So I have done some oral myofunctional therapy training with Brooke Pettis on the
Oh
toddler
yeah,
reading.
she talks a lot about that kind of stuff. That's good.
And then I've reached out to a lot of like local members that's what they do is work with that infant population. So a big one in our area, I'm sure Health Latch, Dr. Thomas.
Yeah.
He's got a good program for like that really narrow window from 0 to like 3 months.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's pretty powerful to even just have that in an area, because knowing what to even have your babies looked at for, like that, being able to look for a posterior tongue tie.
It's so important. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because none of my kids had an issue with breastfeeding. They latched great. My older one did have issues with more acid reflux, kind of because there was more air being swallowed with her suck than it needed to be, stomach bloating, distended stomach, that sort of symptoms. Her sleep was disrupted, but we thought it was just simply the reflux for her, because if we prop her up, she seemed to sleep better. But it's one of those things that, like, had I known that was really because of the tongue tie, I would have just had it released when she was little. Now I wouldn't have to be going back and getting her tongue tie released, doing early orthodontics and doing all these things. I mean, she already has sleep disordered breathing. For kids, I don't know if people are aware, but if you have even like one episode of the
Disruption,
they count it as sleep apnea. So she averages about 4.
Oh wow.
She definitely qualifies for that.
That's I'm so glad that you know this stuff, because now you can help her, because most parents, how would you know?
You wouldn't.
That's my biggest thing, is that most people don't even know their kids have these types of issues. I think if most people knew about it, if it was like mainstream knowledge, people would get help. But so many parents they've never heard of these things. So how old are you have 2 daughters?
Yeah, so 20 months and 4-year-old. So
4-year-old, okay.
Yeah. And it's interesting to me because I do know these things. And so for me, watching her behavior, Sleep Direct Kids, great book, highly recommend everyone read that.
That's good.
But really, it's, if I didn't know these things, I just would think she's an angry, combative, sassy personality. Like, and she is strong-willed. But
Take a
it's
strong-willed
more.
kid and then put a sleep disorder or breathing problem on top of that, and it's just, it becomes, behavioral problems and
Yeah.
all these things. Yeah.
Yeah. And she had, when she was younger, what we would call the tired jollies, which is where, she gets super silly, super like just crazy right at bedtime. And trying to get her down to sleep was like a 2-hour ordeal.
Oh my gosh.
And that's exhausting. And then the parents are tired and fed up and they're like, why won't you go to sleep?
Yeah.
And honestly, she still has issues with some nights with bedwetting, and she's 4. It should be resolved. She has full control. But I mean, I noticed that even as being an issue when she was 2, when she was potty trained and knew what to do, but she was still having the nighttime issues. And I think a lot of people don't even think of that. They think it's normal.
Yeah.
Because so many kids have it, and so many kids, like, it's common, but it's not healthy, and it's not what's bad, but it's what happens, because that's what culture tells us is okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we just don't know. So
yeah.
Oh man. Okay. So you're going down the path, helping them, early intervention, ortho, have both had their tongue ties released?
They have not. My 20-month-old actually
They're
has.
right in that tough age. Yeah.
Yeah. And she has some issues with like methylation and a neural tube tether. I don't know if you're familiar with that either. It's not spina bifida, but it's just a little bit more complex. So her nervous system isn't
interesting
as on par as it should be. And she's actually had, reactions to things that she really shouldn't, if that makes sense. Like her level of how much toxicity she can handle is really low compared to most people. And so
are people connecting that to like the MTHFR stuff? I know that comes with a lot of sensitivities and the neural tube defects and stuff like that.
Yeah. So the MTHFR really, so that encompasses like your ability to methylate, and methylate is really just the proteins around your DNA that will either turn it on or off. And if you don't have adequate ability to properly hit the light switches on and off, it takes more for you to turn a bad gene off, and it's easier for those things you don't want to see happen. So detoxing your body is really hard. And retrospectively, I haven't been tested for it myself, but I've always been hypersensitive to everything.
Yeah.
Even like medications, I like take the quarter size of a whole pill, because I will just be like, either conked out for a whole day if I take Benadryl, or jittery through the roof if I have a cup of coffee. So it's,
there's so many of these overlapping things, and I know there's no direct connection, like through research saying tongue tie is connected to MTHFR gene mutations, but I think we kind of know clinically, and in the people who deal with this stuff, we know that there are some overlaps, and it's impossible to say how, I think. But there's definitely overlap of a lot of this stuff. So
it is. We're at that stage of research where there's like comorbidities. So you see that they're happening together, but we don't understand if it's a correlation, a causation. And in my opinion, my kid's life is important now, and I see these issues now. So even though the research may not be 100% there, if there's simple, non-invasive things I can do to improve their life, I'm not going to wait 20 years down the line.
Totally. Especially if it's just like, oh, don't eat this food, or try to eat more of that, or take this supplement. I mean, those are so non-invasive. Why wouldn't you try?
Yep. And breathe and sleep right. Like, make sure that you prioritize that in your lifestyle. It's not, it shouldn't be rocket science, but it's become something more complex than it needs to be. Like you mentioned, breathing should be innate and natural and easy, but it's not an easy breezy thing for most people.
Which is so crazy.
Well,
I mean, this has all been so good. You brought up so many topics that even though you're the 31st interview, we haven't talked about a lot of this stuff. So I really appreciate you touching on all these new topics and making the videos interesting. Do you want to just summarize up your husband's situation, and then we'll just wrap it up?
Sure. Yeah, that sounds great. So, like I had kind of mentioned, as a kid, he had a lot of allergies and asthma, things of that nature. So he kind of developed that postural habit. He's a basketball player, so broken nose, you know, the deviated septum issue, the teeth. I mean, we actually have his models from his like orthodontist when he was like 8. Like his teeth are so crowded, like the poor thing. But they unfortunately went with the times, and what they knew was best was take out teeth and then move the teeth to make them look pretty.
Them out.
Yeah, but taking teeth out, as we know in the profession, it just makes everything smaller and harder for that airway to be wide. It becomes narrow. He's also tongue-tied. That's been since released for him. His wasn't as quick of a response as it was for me, because the roof of his mouth is very pointed. So and he doesn't have room for his tongue. You know, it's that big car and teeny tiny garage. Like the big car doesn't fit in the garage. So he's having a little harder time, and he is going to need a little bit more of that expansion we were mentioning with some airway ortho, and we just got to kind of figure out where and
down the road what that means and what that looks like.
Yeah.
Well, good. I mean, at least, you're probably doing the therapy with him. You're probably helping him, breathe through his nose and, get that kind of stuff under control. So, you do the best you can, and we're all at some point in the journey, so.
Well, that's just it. It is a journey, and it's much easier when you catch it in your kids and take care of it when they're young. But
way better. Yeah. If you can do that's way better. So.
And nonetheless, I'm helping like my parents, my in-laws and stuff like that. And so you can do it when you're 60 and still have great results too.
Oh gosh, it's never too late to start switching to nasal breathing and closing your mouth and putting your tongue in your palate. I think when people say, oh, I'm in my 50s, it's too late, or I'm in my 60s, it's too late. I'm like, no, it's not. Your life will be so much better.
Yeah. So it's pretty powerful. So I appreciate you spreading the word and allowing us to share our stories, because we all have different ones.
I think it's so good. And actually, I didn't even realize how amazing this would be until I've gone through all these interviews, and now I'm just like, wow, this information is so important to get out there. So thank you. And I will, hopefully be able to thank everyone else along the way who's participated. But is there anything else you want to say? Maybe give a little shout out to your practice and how people can find you.
Yeah, so my practice is a play on my name. It's called Doing It for the Kids. So that's Kitz. And it's my mantra. Everything I do for my kids. And I think a lot of parents connect with that. I had these health issues, but I never actually did it until I had the kids in play. And then health matters for yourself, and you want best for them. And so I really help the whole family work together to make lifestyle changes that are easy and simple and sustainable, because if you can't keep it up, what's the point? You're just going to revert back to problems. And so it's really not as complex as it needs to be, but it's sometimes hard to do on your own because there's a lot of information out there.
No, I love that. And I'm so happy that you're taking myofunctional therapy to the next level with like health and babies and all that stuff. So awesome. I'll link your website, Facebook, all the ways that people can find you and reach out to you. Kate is in Maple Valley, Washington. So if you're local, maybe at some point she'll be able to see you in person when, the COVID stuff calms down. But I think for now, are you doing telehealth stuff online?
I am.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much for doing this and for being my final interview. I think it was a great final interview. So thank you. And I guess I'll just let you get on with your weekend.
Perfect. You too.
All right. Thank you so much. Bye.